Hi students, let's continue with lab 1. So before you go through this video, I am assuming that you have already gone through the part 1 and part 2 of today's lab. Part 1 gives you an overview of what to expect from the lab component of the course, and part 2 shows you a step-by-step installation guide for the environment that we will be using to do our tasks. So for each lab you will get a PDF document, a worksheet like this. I would recommend to download the worksheet before going through the lab so you can follow step-by-step process as well, because it tells you everything. The first step of today's lab is to set up and connect to the MySQL server in XAMPP. So you should have already gone through part 2 of today's lab component, which shows you a step-by-step process of installation. I will quickly just go through it again. You have to go to apachefriends.org/index.html and download the XAMPP that is appropriate for your operating system. So it's available for Windows, Linux and OS X. I have downloaded and installed OS X. So all Windows users are requested to go to the previous video and follow the step-by-step process there, because the starting interface for different machines like OS X and Windows is different. So Windows users, sorry about this, Windows users, after you download and install, you have to turn on the XAMPP control panel and you will see a windows like this, and you have to switch on Apache and MySQL. Like, you have to press the start button, which is highlighted in red. After you have done that, you have to click on shell here, this button, and it will take you to a black command line interface. So if you are an OS X user, then after you install XAMPP, you will see and start the XAMPP application, you will see something like this. So you have to press the start button. Once the server is started, this will turn green, and you have to click on open terminal. So Windows users, when you click on shell, and OS X users, if you click on open terminal, you will be presented with a black interface, command line interface like this. After this, whatever I'm going to do is same for any operating system, so you don't have to worry. Okay, so the initial just interface for starting XAMPP is different in different operating systems. Okay, so after you have set it up, you have to go to part B, where we will be doing some very simple tasks, which means we will be creating a database and a table and inserting some data. So this is the command line interface. Now I will type in. So at the beginning, I have to actually log in to the MySQL server. So to log into the MySQL server, I will have to type in this command, mysql -u root -p. So when I press enter, it will ask for the password. So by default, XAMPP's password is an empty string. Therefore, I will not type in anything. I will simply press the enter button. So once you press enter, if it's logged in correctly, then you should see either MariaDB or MySQL written here. Both are correct, so nothing to worry about. So it should be either MariaDB or MySQL. So I'm just minimizing this window a little bit. Okay. So once we are logged in, if you want to see what databases are already present in the server, you can just type in this command, show databases, and semicolon. So semicolon gives your server the idea that your command is finished. Okay, so once you press semicolon, this will be considered as a whole command by your server. So show databases semicolon gives you a list of database that's in your server. So for each of you the list will be different. There are some that all of you will have because these are default databases, and some of you might have different. If you have already created some database already in your server, then you will see those as well. So I have this test database, maybe all of you might not have it. Anyways, so these are the existing databases. So let's say I want to create a different database, because let's say you are developing two programs. Let's say you are developing a restaurant management system and you are developing a hospital management system. Okay, so you will need different databases for both the softwares, right? So you will need to be able, should be able to create different databases in the same server. So now we will create our database. So the command is create database, and then you have to give a database name. So this name can be anything you want. Okay, it will just follow some naming conventions. That is, if your name has multiple words, there cannot be any space between the words. You can use an underscore, or you can use camel case, which means only the first letter is capital. Okay, so create database. So you can give again any name you want. So I want to give this name CSC 370 underscore lab, and then I give semicolon. I press enter. It says query OK, right? So it says query OK, which means my command has been executed successfully. If I again type in show databases, you can see that the new database that I created also appears in my list. Before it was not in the list, now it is in the list. So now I have many 6 databases here, but I want to create table in some specific database, right? So I have to select the database in which I want to work in. So that command is use. Okay, so use, then I have to give the name of the database that I want to work in. So I want to work in the CSC 370 underscore lab database. So I'm going to say use CSC 370 underscore lab and press enter. So the database has changed. So it says database changed, which means your command has been executed successfully. So now that I'm in the database, I can check whether I have table in the database or not. So if I type in show tables, it shows me an empty set. It means that there are no tables in the database. That's because I have not created any, right? So now I want to create a table where I will store data. So the table will have columns, and each column will have a column header or a name. So these are known as attributes. So so my command would be create table create table, and then I have to give a table name. So the table name can be anything you want, again just like the database name, but usually it is something meaningful so that you can easily understand what's stored in the table. So let's say we want to store student data from the course here. So I can say create table lab, say lab grades. Okay, then I'll have to put an opening bracket. After the opening bracket, I will list the name of all the columns. So here I have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 columns, and each column name is written in bold. So again, these names are anything you wish, but the names are usually meaningful so that you understand what is stored in the column. And beside the column name, there is something else, char, varchar, int, and so on. These are the data type of the column. So what kind of data, whether it would be an integer data or a double data or a character data, you have to specify that as well. So let's see. So after this, after create table lab grades opening bracket, I can either go to the next line and type, or I can keep on typing here, but it would be easier to understand if I go to the next line. I mean, it's visually nicer. So I want my first column to be called student ID, and I want the data type to be character. So I want maximum, so basically this is a string type data, so it will take 4 characters maximum. So from 0 to 4 you can save any number of characters for student ID. Then I want name, the data type is varchar, and maximum character is 30. So varchar is variable character. The difference between char and varchar is how the data is stored in memory. Char occupies a fixed length in memory and varchar occupies a variable length in memory, which means if I say char 30, 30 character spaces will be fixed, and if I save less than 30 characters, then that space will be wasted. And varchar is variable, which means it will only take up the space that I use for storage. Then I want another, which is major. I want to store the major of the student, whether it's a CS or CSE and so on. So I will also use character type of maximum length 3. Then I want to store the section of the student. So let's say it will be of character type but of length 1. Then how many days the student was present. I want to make that an integer variable. Then I want to save the project marks. So all students will do projects in the lab. So I want to save the marks for that. And I want to save the CGPA of all students. So CGPA would be decimal 3, 2. Now double and decimal are basically the same thing, that is they will store floating point numbers, but in decimal you have to mention the length, the number of digits there will be in the decimal number. So since CGPA has a fixed format, in all your CGPA, if you notice, it always has 3 digits, right? 3.56 or 3.99, something like that, right? So 3 digits, therefore 3 shows that there will be only 3 digits. And in all of your CGPAs, the decimal point is before the last 2 digits, like 3.56, right, or 3.12. So that's why this 2 shows the position of the decimal point. And finally I have the submission date, the date when the project was submitted, submission date, and the data type is date. So there is a date data type as well in MySQL. So after this, since this is the last column, I won't give comma after submission date. So there is no comma here, but in all of these there is comma, because there will be so when you are listing something, the last thing does not have a comma, right? So no comma after this. Then I will just close the opening bracket, and then I will give a semicolon to show that my command is done, and press enter. So it says query OK, right? So it means my table has been created. I can check by saying show tables. If I click on if I type in show tables, it shows me lab grades. Before, when I typed in show tables, it was showing me empty set because there was no table. Now show tables shows me that there is one table named lab grades. And if I want to see the structure of the table, that is if I type in describe, my table name is lab grades. If I type in this if I type this in, it shows me the fields that are present in the table, that is the column names, the data type of each table. So integer, it shows 11. I did not say integer 11, but it shows 11 here. This is because this is the default length of integer. So it shows me the data type and the field. It shows some other information. For now you don't have to understand this. This much is enough. So I will continue in the next video. So let's continue there.